It is auspicious that we're meeting at a public house. Throughout most of American history, the important things that happened started out of men's discussions in public houses. Everything from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War and what happened in between started out when men would get together at these public houses and discuss their problems and their issues and what they wanted to do about it. There was a long period of time when public houses dominated the political landscape as well. It was an important place for politicians to go and speak directly to the men who voted. And that has never really changed. And so I think that it makes sense that we're here. You know, American history happened at a pub with a beer in their hand. And that's how most decisions were made. And so being here made, in a way, seem, wow, why are we at a bar? We're at a bar because that's where history happens in this country. One of the things that I noticed in the previous couple of presentations, and especially in the last one, is we learned a lot about how mothers are able to intuit their children's emotional state. And this is because women exist primarily below the chin and men primarily above the chin. In fact, we're with a group of highly intelligent men and women today, and many of us, we actually exist up here at the top. We're often up here because in the beginning we were talking about problems, and men, when they hear problems, they go into problem-solving mode. And that happens up here. Okay, we've already taken in the information, because that happens in here, in our sight primarily, and in our hearing. But I want you to take some deep breaths in, and I want to allow the feeling of your center of where you are to begin to fall down into your eyes. And you're going to see me at the front of the stage here. And you're going to hear what I have to say. Another deep breath. And you're going to feel that center of your attention fall down into your chest. And as you can do that, and the better you are at doing that, you're going to notice that you're more relaxed and you're more calm. You're also going to be more connected with your emotions. It is important as men that we have time where we allow our mental capacities to take a break. Curt often mentions fire gazing. It's an opportunity for us to take a break and we move into our body. It's also the only way that we can understand most women and children, since they exist primarily in their body. Ideally, we have the ability to stretch ourselves and be present and integrated all the way from the top of our head down to the groin. But as you breathe and you pull yourself down in there, it makes it easier to understand why the majority of the population is susceptible to manipulation. I wrote this book because I wanted to show you the methods that are used by professional manipulators to hijack people's minds. Now, most of us in here, we're quite immune to manipulation. And we look at people and we say, how did they fall for that? They must be stupid. They're not stupid. They have untrained minds. Some of them are stupid, but that's not the reason they fell for manipulation. The reason they fell for it is they have these untrained minds. They don't understand what we understand. And they don't have the desire, the time, or the energy to invest in figuring out how to identify what is truth. Because that's what I wanted to write my book on in the beginning. How can you identify truth? And I looked at that problem and I said, this is beyond the ability to explain to the vast majority of people, no matter how much I simplify it. So I had a conundrum.
You're a smart guy.
Well, you know, that's actually a problem.
No, it is.
It is. It's a problem for two reasons. One, if you're smart, you start to think everyone else is the same way, and therefore your explanation should be immediately obvious to everyone else. And you need to find either someone that's used to dealing with, and I did have a benefit of being a minister for many years. And while I was a minister primarily to people who were suffering from addiction, people who were involved in prostitution trade, this type of thing, and the really bottom of society that was suffering. And that tends to correspond with the less capable members of society as well. And so I have some idea of how to reach these people. And you don't reach them if you're up here. They're not going to listen to you. You're speaking a foreign language to them. You have to be able to pull yourself down into your body and to start to understand that they're not thinking, they're emoting. They confuse it with thinking, but it's not thinking. And I wanted to make sure that people could protect their entire family. That meant it had to be simple enough that they could explain it to their children. Oop, wrong direction. So what is manipulation? Manipulation is a form of aggression. It's using words as weapons. It's social and emotional warfare. I mean, you should have to learn this before you go to school. It should be, you know, the problem is we actually learn the reverse. I'll get into that later. We actually learn to fall for manipulation before we go to school. But it's social and emotional warfare. That's why I brought you into your emotions, to understand this is where the battlefield is. And if you're going to fight on a battlefield, you have to engage in that battlefield using the tools that are available on that battlefield. The primary weapon used against us in the current war that we're involved in, and make no mistake, we are in a war. Some people will call this the continuation of the Second World War or the Third World War. It's a fifth generation war, which means it's fought in the hearts and minds of people. It means it's fought with manipulation. They want them, instead of being able to self-regulate their emotions, they want to regulate their emotions. If you think it's powerful to control what people think, imagine if you can control what they feel. Because I can think anything I want, doesn't mean I'm going to do anything. We act based on our feelings. This is an uncomfortable truth even for us logical men and women, is that we're mostly deciding, we may decide with our mind, but then we have to act with our heart. We don't do it purely out of logic. That's no motivation. Think of the word motivation. It's emotions that motivate us. The idea of fifth generation warfare is to control information and perception. It is to demoralize, confuse, and distract so that you do not have to engage in third generation warfare, which would be devastating to our enemies. The thing is everyone's a combatant in this because everyone is on the front line. That includes your children. And there's no way you can completely take them off the front line. That's scary. And there's no way you can get off either. You can't go hide, maybe a few people can go hide in the woods, but that's no solution to the problem. There is no neutrality, and there is no civilian-soldier division. Everyone is either a soldier, a combatant, or a victim in this war. That's your choice. Are you going to be a combatant or a victim? Your children are the targets of billions of, I would say trillions, of dollars worth of lies and propaganda that are aimed at controlling how they feel, what's important to them, their identity, what they think, and how they process the world. There's a battle. Well, they want them dumb because we think our way out of these problems. A lot of us here, we have thought our way out of things before we found each other and finished that process. We half escaped because something in our brain said, no, don't do that. So because the manipulation is all around us, it's our job as adults to have we have some natural defenses around this, but we need to prepare our children to have their natural defenses set up and running from the moment that they're able to take in information. So how do you protect your children from manipulation? Well, first of all, you have to defend yourself. It's like when you go in the airplane and the mask falls down and they say, put your mask on first, then put your kid's mask on. You do it in that order because you have to protect yourself so you can have the energy to protect someone else. Also, when you buy my book and you read it, you're going to understand the first place most children encounter manipulation is in the home. I call it mother's milk. So the mother, she has a natural need to have the child behave. And the easiest way to do that is to manipulate the child. When a child is very small, she can kind of make the child do things physically. And then boys get to a certain age and they very quickly get stronger than their mothers. And when that happens, the only tool she has to gain compliance, the word from earlier, the only tool she has to gain that compliance is through manipulation. Now, I wouldn't say that makes the mother evil. I would say that means she has a need that she can't meet because she doesn't know any other way. Most people don't manipulate out of evil intention or maliciousness. They manipulate because they have needs, they have emotional, social needs that they need to get met, and they're afraid and they don't know any other way to meet it, and they've seen their needs met before through manipulation, so they're going to try again. The problem is that, go ahead.
There's a trust thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I basically, mother is the name for God who lives in all children. And so, I did stuff to make my mother happy because I just couldn't bear that she was unhappy. But you got to create that first.
Yes.
And so if you don't create that, then you've got to resort to manipulation. But I can't remember mother manipulating me at all, other than, well, you can clean your room, or I can make you clean the bathtub. Which would you wish? Which But I don't remember ever having to be. My sisters, on the other hand, manipulating all day long. But I don't remember that. So
it is possible that she didn't manipulate you. It's also possible she was so good at it that you can't see it.
yeah, that's true.
And that
You just call me stupid because I think that's what I heard.
we're all a little bit stupid when it comes to our mother. Because we are trained not to see things, and we often transfer that then on to our wives, and so it creates this complication in helping our spouse get their needs met, because we end up encouraging the manipulation by allowing it. And Luke was absolutely right when he said no is important. No is part of how we end manipulation. And what happens is we get that early manipulation from our mother, but what she does is she helps us to internalize it. Because here's the key to manipulation. You cannot be manipulated unless you consent. This is not like physical things where someone grabs you, throws you down, and makes you do something. You cannot be manipulated unless you consent. This is incredibly powerful, because it means that for the first time ever, you as the ordinary civilian have a tremendous ability to defend yourself in a war, because you can say no. And you can teach your children what manipulation is. And once they understand it, here's the thing. I want them, and I want you, to have a visceral gut reaction to it. You don't need to intellectualize it. You know it well enough that when you see it, you feel sick to your stomach and you say, how dare you try to do that to me? And you say, no, I'm not going to let you do it. But here's the key. My book doesn't tell you how to just stop manipulation, because if people don't get their needs met through manipulation, they will resort to other, often worse methods. What you have to do, and my book explains how to do this, is you have to teach people how to interact with you in order to get their needs met. And this means this is a skill, and those who are better at doing that are incredibly attractive people. So if you want to pull people into your life, that includes your own spouse and children, you want to keep them close to you, you need to let them get their needs met through you, and you need to teach them how to do that. And the way you teach them is the way they will interact with you. If you allow them to manipulate you, they will. If you don't, they'll find other ways. You teach them persuasion. And here's the difference. So manipulation it creates a non-reciprocal, I win and you lose. I get what I want. I don't care if you do, because I'm trying to fulfill my needs. And the second part of it is it treats people like objects to be moved. It's manipulation. I manipulate an object. Nothing wrong with that. When I manipulate a person, now that's a problem. And the end result of manipulation is that breakdown of trust that Luke mentioned earlier. It comes through the involuntary compliance. It comes through manipulation. Our breakdown of trust in our society is due to these two reasons, what Luke presented and what I'm presenting. And because that's happened, manipulation stopped working. It's getting weaker and weaker. This is good news. Came out with my book about a year ago, and now I see constantly in the news them talking about this group is manipulative, that group's manipulative, ban the ADL, all of this stuff, because people can see I'm being manipulated, and I'm not exactly sure what's right or wrong, but I know that's wrong. You may have heard of Sherlock Holmes. One of his main quotes from the Sherlock Holmes novels is he says, if you take away whatever is impossible, whatever is left, no matter how improbable, is likely the truth. And that's the process of identifying manipulation and saying, I'm going to take away everything that can't be true. And maybe I don't know of the last options what is true, but they're probably all okay. And that's what I'm teaching people how to do, and that's what you can learn and teach your children. Now you need to raise your children to be warriors in this fight. They will come under attack. In fact, the principal battleground in this fight it was women, now they've shifted off to children. I'd say from the 70s onward it was women, and in the last decade it's been children. Even when I went to school, I was in Canada, so we were always ahead of the degeneracy. We were, if you're going to run a trial balloon of some bad idea, you'd run it in Canada.
Yeah, the French have to think of it first, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, it usually starts out in Quebec and we hear about it there, and then it moves over. It's
So the thing that really resonated with me, which is teach your children. Now, something I think about often because I've noticed that living around the world is, I grew up in this part of the country, right? And well, grew up is a question. I know. Let's just overlook the grow up part. But when I was a kid, I grew up in the Anglo-Saxon tradition of teasing, pranking, riddling, puzzling. And what's that really trying to do?
stress test.
It's stress testing you against your ability to be manipulating. And the thing that I liked about moving to this part of the country, which is especially Boston and Connecticut area, is the masculine trash talking that comes from the Irish and the Catholics. And who are the other Catholics? The Irish and the Italians, right? I mean, it's both macho bullshit stuff. I love this crap. All right. So you come here and you see that. What is that? It's trust building.
Yes.
So the problem is when I travel around the world, like I remember, I tell this story all the time, being in Russia, and I just once I figured it out, I started asking everybody I could. So who's it, because somebody brought it up earlier, who's to blame? The person who tells the lie or the person who believes it? Well, in the West, it's the person who lies, because that's a civic responsibility. But in Russia, it's the individual who believes the lie. And that's a low trust thing. And the problem when you get to the Middle East is they're like, well, it's heroic, so if you get away with your family. And then in Africa, they can't tell the difference.
Yes. Well, you mentioned an important thing is that shit talking is a test of fitness.
Yes.
And it builds trust. This includes, gentlemen, when your wives shit test you. They only do that to men they care about, because they'll tear up a man they don't care about, but they'll only test you if they care about you, and they're trying to look for your fitness, and if you pass these tests, you build trust with them. And occasionally it can get out of hand, because usually gets out of hand if we don't answer the test properly. Same thing with men. I grew up with guys doing that, and it was somewhat physical, it was somewhat intellectual, and it was somewhat linguistic, how fast you were at responding. And if you backed down or you showed you were afraid, then that meant you deserved some more abuse. And you'd get that until you stood up like a man.
And one had this, and Lucas beat this into my thick skull quite effectively. But the thing is, it's actually hard to make your children, that's like a thing we need to teach parents, right? Because they might even not know when,
No, it has to start with the parents. Okay. Number one, you need a strong family identity. Here's the thing. If your children don't have an identity, don't worry. They can go to school and someone will give them one. That identity may include their castration. It may include them becoming, and it's not recent. If you went to school a few years back, the identity might have to do with, sports teams, or might have to do with music. At least they weren't so harmful. And these are all identities they're commoditized products. If you look into the money behind some of these identities that the children are given, you'll realize that all they did is say, hey, sports isn't that profitable, let's give them some other identity that we can sell them on, and keep them permanently in need of pharmaceutical drugs for the rest of their lives just to survive. But look, if you don't give your kid not only you have to give your kid an identity, it has to be stronger and more compelling than the identity crafted by the best marketing minds in the world who've spent billions of dollars on this. You can't do this unconsciously. You need to pay attention. You need to plan this out. You need to war game this. You need to strategize so that you capture your children's attention, because you capture them or somebody else will. You need to have a purpose for your family. What's the purpose of your family? Is the purpose of your family just to reproduce? Are your kids, yeah, this kind of happened? What's the purpose of your family? The purpose of my family is to, over the next few generations, achieve a level of sovereignty such that no one can have power over us. My son knows that. He's known that since he could speak. I speak to him about this. I talk to him about how are we going to do it? Oh, sorry. Who we have to become in order to do that. You become the family that accomplishes your family's purpose. If you have no purpose, then you become a family who accomplishes nothing. There is no solution that we're going to be able to implement by the next election, by the next season, by the next year. It's only these intergenerational solutions that can last the test of time. Curt is absolutely right. There's only a handful of laws that need to be changed to change the incentives, but we still have to do the work.
Yep.
We can stop the undermining, but we still need to build. Enthropy, we can't stop entropy. We can stop the enemy from aiding entropy, but then we have to counter it by building. And here's the thing, not everyone's going to build. So who is going to build? Our next generation of aristocrats. This is what you're building. If you do this,
I don't know what that word means.
aristocrats. Aristos means the best of us. It does not mean some sort of landed nobility.
This means the best.
You could be the best carpenter. You could be a master. You can be an absolute master of it, the best of it. Now, this was the attitude if you have much experience with German tradesmen. They might be a carpenter, but they take it as seriously as a surgeon takes surgery.
Yeah.
It is absolute perfection. That is what an aristocrat is. But that comes from having purpose and becoming the person that fulfills that purpose and the family that fulfills the purpose. Curt was right. It is the family is the unit of civilization, the basic unit, not the individual. And here's the thing. When I say family, most of you think mother, father, children. That's not how I think about family. I think everybody who's related to you in an ever-widening concentric circle. Ideally, you want your 2 or 3 or 4, hopefully you have more kids, to each raise kids of their own and to cooperate together, not spread out all over the earth so that they, what did the Bible say God did with people when he wanted them to have less power? He spread them out across the earth, and here we're doing that with our own children. And we send them all to the 4 corners of the earth. So what do? We squander the power of our family. Instead, we want to impress upon our children the family's mission by creating ritual, habits, traditions, and passed along wisdom. I was very fortunate that I grew up in a family that had kept records for 450 years of what we did. We traveled across Europe. We ended up in Russia, took a boat all the way down. And imagine all the places you have to pass in a boat in the 18th century to get up to England so we could come over to Canada. All the children died on that voyage in the entire extended family. So about 200 people started the voyage, about 112 finished it. All the dead were children, and a couple of older people as well. But we had a purpose. What was our purpose? It was the same reason we were in Russia in the first place, and it's the same reason we had previously been in Frisia and Denmark. We went where we had sovereignty, where the government couldn't touch us, where there was no tax man, where there was no church to tell us what to believe, and where there was no one to take our children into the military as slaves. We had a purpose as a family, and we stuck together for 450 years. And then we came to Canada and got wealthy and lost our purpose, and the family broke up. And one entire generation had only a handful of children between all of those couples. And thus, the family collapsed. But as my son says, if our ancestors did it, we can do it too. These rituals, these habits and traditions, these are things you create, but I highly suggest using as a template things that have been used in the past, preferably from your culture, from your people. Now here's the thing. Let's get off of the family topic and talk about profiting from this 5th generation warfare. So we've talked a lot about what the problem is. We've talked about how to defend ourselves. And now I want to talk about going on the offensive. I want to talk about fighting in this. We have to use the information that we know. We know things other people don't know. We have access to information. We'd like them to know it. We hope they know it eventually. But in the meantime, we need to profit off of this because this is a war, and war is about profit. We need to figure out how to create more competitive organizations. Right now, the diversity, equality, and inclusion people, or the DIE people, no, they didn't choose DIE. Someone else mentioned that. Those people are going into companies and intentionally crippling them. How hard do you think it'll be to compete against a large, bloated enterprise where half their employees were hired because of what they look like? But here's the thing, in the chaos and in the self-destruction, there is opportunity. There is always opportunity in chaos. That's what it means. And so we have to look, where can we take that opportunity? Right now, there's a tremendous, and it doesn't matter if you're intellectually inclined or physically inclined. If you're physically inclined, there's such a shortage in the trades because they've been driving young white men, who are the majority of the trades, away from that. They've been directing us into university so they can propagandize us and then telling us we can't apply for the jobs that we just tried to qualify for because we're white. So grab those guys, go do something with them. If you're part of a family, the rest of your family is going to say, no, you save that money, invest into the family trust. You know, you invest in, you get back later. This is the advantage of families. We tend to make less stupid, selfish decisions. You'll see this with married men. They usually make more money and they save more money and their life is better and they're healthier. And everything about the way they live improves because they have the responsibility of marriage. We talked earlier about responsibility being connected with adulthood. It is unhealthy for us not to take on responsibility. You've probably met someone that said, yeah, I never had kids so that it didn't destroy my body. Meanwhile, they're obese and they're sick. And hey, guess what? We die anyway. You know, the quality of life that we have when we take on responsibility will always be higher than the quality of life when we don't, even if it's a struggle in the beginning. We also have to start fraternizing against mass manipulation. What that means is we have to get together and talk in non-manipulative environments, in places where we're not being attacked, where the trust is high, and where we can cooperate in taking down the organized manipulation that we're facing. We're not going to be able to do this on our own. We can in our personal life, but if we want to fight an organization, you fight it with an organization. And we need to fraternize. Sometimes this doesn't, I'm not saying this is the answer, but I'm saying if you get enough smart men in the same room, they're going to figure the answer out. Why do you think during COVID they didn't want us getting together? Because if you got enough of us together, and I know this because I was getting together with people when you weren't allowed, and what are we talking about? If it gets worse, what do? We got the right equipment, we got the right people, we got the right training. Who do we go after?
Okay, let's be careful here.
Yep. We talk about, no, I meant legally. Like, yeah, like, you know, who do we sue? Yeah. And this is the thing. We need to start fraternizing. We need to get together. We need to talk in small groups about, within the law, rational problem solving. How do we solve these problems that affect us in the fraternity? Lawfare is our primary tool for fighting right now. That's our primary tool, and Curt talked a lot about that, so I don't need to mention much about it. But lawfare is the counter to manipulation, because the law is the truth. You counter lies with the truth. Therefore, lawfare is the counter to being attacked through manipulation in fifth-generation warfare. The term to be frank or to speak frankly, it comes from the Franks. This is the Franks here. The Franks were noble warriors of the Frankish people, so basically German. Another way, one of my friends, she says to speak Germanly. And it means, so to be a Frank is to be free, liberal, and generous. It came to mean to be outspoken, or free, not servile, without hindrance, sincere, genuine, open, gracious, generous, worthy, noble, and illustrious. To speak as a Frank is to speak in this manner, which means, we've been talking about decorum, it's built right into who we are. To be frank is to be a man of the West, or a woman of the West, to speak frankly. And they were able to do that because they were free and had liberty, or exempt from service. They were free men. If we cannot speak frankly, we are not free men. If we give in to manipulation, we are enslaving ourselves to it. This is a choice we make, to speak frankly, to speak freely, or to be slaves. That's the choice I put before you. If you want to contact me, you can hit that QR code, you can buy my book, or talk to me, I'll give you my contacts. What I can help you do is I can help you to weaponize your organizations. I can help you protect them, to build a bulwark of defense around your family, your community, your organizations that are your businesses perhaps, or charities, so that when they come to get you, you know how to protect yourself. Any questions?
So, your work in what we should call therapy, or positive, because I mean, that's the difference. What's the difference in coaching, therapy? It's like, you know...
Therapy fixes your broken bones. Coaching helps you to run faster.
Right, exactly. And so, but it's the same fucking shit, right? I mean, the thing is, you've written an amazing book on this subject matter.
Here's the book. It's available at the back in hardcover, and I'll sign it for you.
But no, that's the manipulation.
Oh, the other one.
You've written another book.
Yes.
Right. So this is a mass market press by your book. But you've written an academic book.
Yes.
In the subject matter. And the point I want to get across is you actually know what the heck you're talking about.
Yes, this is the first book that I wrote, and I wrote this with a good friend of mine, Ryan Drummond, and Ryan's job was to translate what I was writing into English. So I grew up in a polyglot family that spoke, maybe 15, 16 languages altogether, and any one of them spoke 8 or 9 languages. And so when I was a kid, I'd be exposed to these arguments over, is this Sanskrit better than this ancient Koine Greek word for describing this subject? And I thought that was normal. So I went to public school, and I'm speaking English mixed with German mostly, and half a dozen other languages, and nobody could understand me. And so I had to figure out how to speak English after a while. I learned to speak English in school. And I never completely learned how to write in English because I mostly wrote for myself. And so Ryan helped me to make sure that that was in English. And also, I'm the kind of guy who quotes people and doesn't attribute it. Yeah. So, and people ask me, where's your source for that? And I'm like, I am the source. But that's not really good in an academic type of book. So Ryan helped me. But this is really a workbook. When you have this book, you go through it in such a way that over the course of the chapters, it allows you to regulate your own emotions. And it allows you to understand how your mind works so that you can maximize your change into the person you want to be. We are constantly coming up as we get older with new opportunities, and each new opportunity means a new responsibility, but it also means a change in how we perceive things. Curt really enlightened me to this, that there's a big difference between running a company on your own, when you're just a solopreneur, than 10 people. There's a big jump around 100, I think it is.
Yes.
And it gets to a point where no matter how competent you are, you just say, I check out, I'm going to sell it. Okay? Because you just don't enjoy it anymore. But you also need to change quite a bit how you think at these different scopes. Now, we've done the same thing in the political scope. The family as the lowest unit of politics, moving all the way up to international politics. The rules change. The law stays the same, but how you apply it changes and your level of responsibility changes. And the reason most of us have problems in life is because we're operating at a level of agency and responsibility that doesn't match the current needs we have. We're not actually broken. We're just a little behind in our development. And helping people to achieve that is key. Curt talks about the small amount of legal changes that we need, but we also need to somehow implement the concepts that I've documented in here that I know work on some in the audience here as well. We need to implement this on a mass scale because we live in a nation of children. It's not just America though, it's the entire world. We've become children, infantilized. Some entire cultures were like that all along, and that's why they're so authoritarian, is because they're dealing with children. But we are not made that way. We don't function under tyranny. But we also we don't have enough people to be able to live as sovereigns either. And we're stuck. We have an infantile population that demands freedom. And the solution to that is we need to help them grow up.
That the freedom is a word for responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, they think free stuff. And we think freedom to choose. And this is hugely different. And be responsible for your choice.
Because freedom
Yes, absolutely. It's been obscured and false promises have been made that you can remain a child without consequence. Please.
How can you say that laws remain the same? I mean, they haven't in this country.
Well, see, the laws are derived from nature, and what many times are falsely called laws are really just the rules of men.
Right.
So if I come and I say the sky is
Well, yeah,
green.
She's asking a different
Yeah.
question.
Oh, sorry.
What she's saying is, you're saying when you say the laws of the laws of nature, the laws of human behavior change. But what she's saying is, yeah, but aren't a lot of our legislation
Yes.
violating those laws?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. A lot of our legislation is violating those laws, and a law that violates natural law is no law at all. It is a fraud. And we have to start describing it that way.
And where do you have this baseline of natural laws? Is there a list somewhere in one of your books? Or?
On the natural law website that we have, there's a lot of explanation of it. It is derived, as we've described before, from the science of human cooperation. So there is ways that we cooperate as humans that are fundamental to nature, and they're the same as Curt said, the cooperation between atoms. The difference is we get to choose. So we can choose between different methods of cooperation. They have different costs. Go ahead, Curt.
When I write, if you look at the science, it's going to be incomprehensible.
Yeah.
If you look at the Constitution, it might be comprehensible, but it's overwhelming. So what we're trying to produce now is what's called a pamphlet, which is what you're really looking for, which is the list. All right? And it's not like, it would be really nice if it's the golden rule and the silver rule, right? I mean, it would be nice if it's that simple. Turns out it is the fucking golden rule, all right? Which is that, and it's kind of annoying when you find out, well, the answers are right. We have backed that with the science at all levels, right? And so it's really, how many rules are there, Brad? 30-something?
Not that many.
There's not that many. So it's about 30 rules, and if you get those, it's really, I mean, I think Martin covered like half of them.
Yeah, the difference is if you can explain how an internal combustion engine works very simply to a child, but the actual science behind it is incredibly complex. And most of us don't need to know. Honestly, half the time, I can understand it and I don't need to know because it gets in the way of application. So I'm so focused on application, I leave that to the guys that really like to nerd out about it. Any other questions about manipulation or how that functions in the family?
No, that was a freaking excellent.
Awesome. It's actually good at the end of a speech when you don't get too many questions because it means you closed all the loops. Thank you, everyone.